usually let you go as long as 40 minutes or even 45 if you get on a roll. But at that point, I will cut you off and, uh, time out or, wave semaphore flags, whatever. Anyway, after Isaac completes his Odyssey, we will take a minute of silence, and I'll remind you of that. Then there'll be time for questions, but it's Isaac's choice. If he does not want to answer any questions, that's perfectly okay. And I will pass around the microphone for the questions because we record these sessions. We like both the question and the answer to be recorded. Okie dokie. Without further ado,
Guess I'm doing it. Hi, as Beth said before, I'm Isaac, last name Robinson, and I've been going to this church since I was basically an infant. Um, but I've wanted to do this Odyssey since I saw Joseph Davis do his latest Odyssey, which I think was about a year or so ago.
right?
Um, and I was like, oh wow, this is cool. You can talk about your whole life right here while sitting with someone. But then earlier this month, I saw Alex Westerfeld's Odyssey and thought, oh, I feel too privileged to be doing this. Like, he's gone through so much like struggles and services and stuff. It's like, how does a suburban non-binary child compare? So it ended up making me feel like I was coming at this from a very similar perspective to one of my favorite songs of all time called Leaving LA by Father John Misty. And there's a particular quote in the song that I think really resonates with me at this moment, which is Mara taunts me neath the tree. She's like, "Oh great, that's just what we need. Another white guy in 2017 who takes himself so goddamn seriously." She's not far off. The strange thing is, that's pretty much what I thought when I started this. That song deconstructs Father John Misty, the artist's motivation behind the album that the song Leaving LA is on. It's called Pure Comedy. And it's like 11 minutes long, has a lot of verses, and each verse goes over his motivation for making pure comedy.
Mm.
And that's where I start, trying to whittle it down so I get to my core motivation. But first, a little bit of background about myself. Um, I was born, I was born months early. So early that if I was born 5 days earlier, I probably would have died. Um, but I'm still here. I'm walking. I'm alive, and that's cool and shocking. Um, And since a very young age, I've had the opportunity to develop a passion for the performing arts, namely acting and music being my biggest of said passions, as well as having a fondness for dance. Um, I'll fully admit I was a tad bit of a Satan child. Um, it was mainly just my energy, but I had a tad bit of Satan in me. Still kind of do. Um, and um, fast forward in my life to the double digits. I found out I had to move out of here for a little while. I had to move out to Colorado, due to my dad's job, which I won't go into just yet. Um, but the point is, I had to move to Boulder, Colorado, right as I was 10 years old, just starting middle school. And middle school age is notoriously not fun. So that time in my life was notoriously not that fun. So luckily, about 3 years later, um, came back to Kansas City, 13 years old, all sad and emo and depressed. So I needed some kind of outlet. And the first real outlet I had was through what's called my credo. Um,
Mm.
so when Dave Black asked me to do this Odyssey, my initial motivation was to redo my credo. And for those that don't know, it's a part of the coming of age program here. And there are two very important things in the coming of age program, and that is a week-long trip to Boston and doing what's called your credo, which is just a statement of your beliefs at that point. Scott Hensey and Anthony Edwards mentored me in COA and developing my credo, and I was able to present it about a month or so after the trip to Boston. A summary of that of my beliefs on that are I believe in reincarnation. not just in the Buddhist sense, but you could be reborn anywhere, anytime, any universe. And it didn't even really matter what kind of your previous body was. You'd just be shot down born into something else. I was agnostic. I mean, I think the closest thing I believed to a god at that point was if y'all have ever seen the show Futurama, there is they depict God as just like as a amalgamation of stars in the sky. And that was the closest thing to what I believed in a god at that point. But other than that, I didn't really know. But the key thing about my credo was that I believe that meaning came from creating something. And it didn't matter exactly what that thing was. It could be something artful. It could be, a statement, a speech that you could be given. It could be some kind of science experiment, some kind of construction thing. It could be anything, something that makes sure you have put something into the world. But now I get into my updated thoughts on sort of my credo, sort of my new credo. I checked in with myself spiritually last year because I had just gotten into college and I was like, okay, I need to not be that cynical of a college student. Um, so I checked in myself and I was like, okay, I don't think I need spirituality as much as I think I do. I think I should be able to find meaning in more physical stuff. So I thought about it a bit more and was able to come to these conclusions. I'm unsure of any kind of afterlife now. I mean, yes, reincarnation is definitely a possibility in my mind, but there could very well be some kind of spirit realm where all the ghosts roam free and haunt people. There could be a complete seizing of consciousness, a complete like dark void, no sense, no feeling. Honestly, I'm okay with that outcome if that's the reality. Um, I also would label myself as a humanist. I find value in the physical things in life. You could also call me an absurdist. I find value in the fact that maybe we can't find an objective meaning, or maybe in my personal life, just not really coming up with my own subjective meaning, but being able to see that as an outlet of freedom towards life. A lot of Camus inspired stuff. Um, and then I think the meaning goes a bit more beyond just kind of the artsy side of it. It can just come from the fact that there is no inherent meaning. I mean, as far as I know, we're not told, hey, you have a goal in life, go do it. Um, but it can come from the paradoxical um, lack of it in a weird way. Um, I firmly stand by the. I firmly stand that free will exists. I firmly stand that free will exists, and I'll get more in depth in that a bit later on. But as of right now, I didn't know how to think of free will when I was doing my credo, but now I'm like for sure certain that we're all in control of our bodies, not our fates, or not our fates, the T. Um, but we have free will and a free consciousness. I believe that spiritual experiences are mostly brain chemicals, but don't worry, it's a good thing. That means you're getting stimulated in a very thought provoking way and in a way that is able to uplift and be positive. And that is where a lot of where I would say my, I guess, beliefs would stand. But how I developed these is what I really want to dig into. And that starts with music. Um, my early experience with music was um, ever since I guess, hadn't had a developed consciousness, I was into classical music. That was what I was into. I mean, my parents tried putting on the old Raffi and lullabies for me. I'd cry my eyes out, but um, they'd put on Vivaldi or something. I'm I'm happy. I'm good. I still love classical, and I still go to classical concerts as much as I can, mainly at the Kaufman Center. Um, and it was classical for pretty much all my life till double digits and moving to Colorado, where I was into, well, this ties in with my theater passion, musicals. I really liked a lot of musicals. I was really starting to get into that.
Hmm.
And the other genre was the electronic music genre called dubstep, which is very loud electronics and such. Not as into it anymore, but I at least respect it for being a part of my life. Um, but I didn't start seeing music as I didn't start getting on the path to seeing music as a super profound thing till I moved back here. I was just about to start high school. I was in the car, and my dad mentions a text that my brother sent to him. I have a older brother who's like 14 years older than me. Um, and he texted my dad saying, "Hey, has Isaac heard of this artist called Ghostmane?" And no, of course I haven't heard of such a spooky name like that. But I had a phone at this point, so I could actually check it out in the car. Um, I checked out the music and instantly hated it. Um, it was hip hop. And I had been like a sort of fan of hip hop, kind of a fake fan of hip hop. I mean, I liked some older stuff. I liked the hip hop artist Eminem just a little bit on like a surface level. Um, but I checked. I mean, there was some like newer side of pop stuff. But Ghost Main combined hip hop elements with a lot of metal elements. And so, and I was on and off about metal. I know my cousin absolutely loves metal. Um, but as I said, a bit on and off about that. Um, but point is, I wasn't a huge fan of it. But I kept listening and listening and listening and finding more and more songs of his. And eventually I'm like, okay, this makes sense for me now. I really like edgy guys rapping about edgy stuff. Um, so I was just super into Ghostman at that point and a bunch of different people in that sort of hardcore hip hop scene. And it was pretty much all rap for me until half a year or so later when I listened to this album called Death Consciousness by Have a Nice Life. Isn't that a title? So Death Consciousness was one of the first non-hip hop albums I listened to fully. I'd actually started to get into listening to albums fully. Um, at that point, I think I had listened to an album by Electric Light Orchestra called Time. Um, my friend Sam, who I'm going to mention later, introduced me to it. They were the guys that made Mr. Blue Sky, if you know that song. Um, and I ended up really liking that album, but mostly hip hop. Um, but it was another text from my brother. So I was getting back from a trip in Santa Fe where I was actually seeing Ghost Main. Um, and my brother texted me, "Hey, have you heard of this album, Death Consciousness?" I'm like, "No, I that sounds scary." And he was like, "Well, it's my favorite album of all time, so you should check it out." So I check it out on YouTube. I see how long the songs are, and I'm looking. You see, there's one that's 6 minutes. There's one that's 8 minutes. There's one that's 11 minutes. I'm like, okay, this is an hour and a half album. I'm gonna save this for when I'm actually on the car ride. Um, but the car ride eventually came, and I noticed that there was enough of a lull in our rest stops that I could listen to it. And I would consider that my first real transcendental experience. Um, I mean, I remember literally by the fourth or fifth song, um, just saying out loud in the car, "Hey, mom, this is the greatest album of all time." I don't even know if she remembers that, but I do. Um, and if I were to sort of summarize the album, it would be, um, I initially confined it to a bit of a linear sort of narrative pathway when I initially was dissecting it, but I find it just each track has some different kind of take on death and how it affects life and how one can find life in death and death in life. And by the final track, Earth Mover, um, it goes to the opposite. It talks about immortality. And it realizes that that's pretty much the same fate as death and is able to accept life and death as, I don't know if I'd quite say coexisting, but on a very similar plane. And there's a lot more detail I could talk about that there,
Mm.
but it's become a really profound thing to me and my philosophies. Um, I've considered it what I'd could call it probably the greatest album of all time for years and years now. I'm not 100% sure if it's still true. I haven't done a ranking in a while, but it's still up there and will always be up there. Um, that's one of the first things I really credit for me getting into more dissecting music and stuff. Um, so I had to put those thoughts out there. So I decided to do music reviews. Um, I did very casual, very informal reviews of different albums. Same year that I discovered Ghostman and all that, 2018, first year of high school. And they were very informal, very casual, and they were on Instagram. Um, I mean, I just take a picture of the album cover and then write like a first draft's worth of a review in the caption area where you can put like text and stuff. Um, and call it a day from there. But come a couple years later, come the pandemic, and I decided to make a full account for it, a full Instagram account for it, and start posting like 2 days a week. I'd actually put a bit more effort into the posts, fully edit them, have it so you could scroll through it, and see like a bit more of a review. Um, but I didn't really think much deeper about it until about a year later, where I started toying with ideas of maybe how the history of modern music works and various little theories here and there of how stuff could work, but getting more into the lyrics of things, getting more into how artists do their things. Um, and along with that, there were some other accounts that were already there as well. There was one there was one account specifically who went by Bird Music Log, also now goes by Bird's Library, who introduced a lot of really cool albums to the wider Instagram music community. But they're also like really profound and stuff, and some really, really smart takes on music and stuff that I've let myself be influenced by over the years. So I ended up becoming much more analytical towards music around just last year or so. But I'd say my actual biggest contributor to becoming more analytical about stuff would be the literary critic Harold Bloom and his book, Shakespeare, The Invention of the Human. I discovered that book during the pandemic, where my mom had signed up for this Facebook group called the Shakespeare 2020 Project, which is where you go through all of Shakespeare's plays, poems, and sonnets in 1 year.
Wow.
And you'd have to see all the plays, but it was the pandemic, so you had to resort to video performances and reading them. But people would use different books as guides, and one of the big ones was Harold Bloom's and Shakespeare Invention of Human. Harold Bloom is pretty much the most popular of the big literary Shakespeare critics and what I like to call intelligent trouser guys. Um, and I'd never been into reading that huge. Um, but I found just his rambly, absolute brutal takes on a lot of the stuff on Shakespeare stuff. He loves Shakespeare, but he has a lot of things to say about other things. Um, really mesmerizing. I just found it so fascinating how he was able to mix the sort of informal and formal kind of ordeal into this stream of consciousnessy way of reviewing things, which I ended up adopting a lot of that style into my own music reviews. Um, I'm not I'd say I'm still a pretty big fan of him, but there are still that I'd say I've grown to like a couple more critics over the years. But he's still played a huge influence in how I see things. and art and all that kind of stuff. And that gets me to the actual thoughts on music. So my core thing with music is that music and art in general is it's like an experiment or an equation. And how I describe that is you wouldn't use non-Euclidean geometry for building a house. Um, and a bit more of a in-depth dissection of that is that each work of music and art is its own thing. If you want to like really critique it, you can't place it under specific values. Um, Maybe in just a more of a personal sense, I can definitely see, and I think a personal connection with the art is an amazing thing. But really dissecting it, you have to dissect it for what it is. So one album could say this, but not say that, and vice versa for another album. And as for the history of music, um, I think that sort of the influences, there are plenty of influences throughout music, but there might not be as intentional. I mean, sure, you can name Bob Dylan, Simon and Garfunkel, some Beatles albums. Um, but there were even some guys that were doing some wacky stuff earlier. There's this artist called Joe Meek who tried to get a career started bigger than he wanted it, but never really could get himself up there. Um, but he did come out with an album called I Hear a New World, um, which got like a demo pressing that was very rare. It got a shorter pressing, which was actually able to get out into the world and sell copies. But the sounds and all that are very reminiscent of psychedelic rock. So you could pretty much credit him for debatably pioneering the genre. Um, and then as for concept of music, that is very important. I find the concept maybe not just a narrative, because that's not present in all music. Um, but and not even just the surface level themes, but what could you think the artist is saying? What was sort of that artistic process? And delving into that can say a whole lot about someone and about the world. Um, and then the music itself is also very important. Not just what the guys are saying, but they're putting that music there for a reason, or maybe not a reason at all. Um, you never know, but there are actual instruments there, and there's a reason why that sound was there, or maybe why that instrument was picked. And that's all adding to the thoughts. You could think of it like the music is the thoughts, and the lyrics are the inner monologue. Um, and then finally, for the music thought section, is that the best albums I would find represent pretty much everything conceivable, which sounds crazy, I know, but a lot of what I consider 10 out of 10 albums can pretty much, once you delve into the artists and the themes and the blah, blah, blahs, you can come out with such a large perspective. They could think, oh, wow, this is crazy. And you can, and the thing is, you can keep making new discoveries the more you listen. And maybe the more you stop listening and then come back and listen to it and make even more new discoveries. That's the beauty of art. It's stationary. And we're always moving as humans. So we can just keep gathering that kind of information constantly. But I've talked on a long time about music. Now let's get into some non-music related stuff. And I want to start with how I envision God. Um, my personal belief says that God doesn't exist, but he should not be disregarded. Faith should not be disregarded at all because there's no reason to. I know a lot of snarky nihilists that do that, but I mean, I'm raised you. There should be no reason to really berate someone for their faith and their thoughts on God. Um, but I don't think that faith should necessarily be a substitute for truth because that's what a lot of conservative guys do. You hear the old "but the Bible says." Well, clearly you haven't read the Bible at that point. Um, but what I think faith should be is a vessel for betterment. And I'm not just saying that as a self-improvement agenda, but it can be in small things like mental health and just little things like that. Um, you know, having a community every Sunday, helping out, doing prayer as a form of meditation. That's totally okay. Um, and as for something like the Bible, I think that should be treated in the same way that people treat Greek or Norse mythology. Not as core beliefs, because I said about the whole what the Bible says thing. I could definitely see in years to come, once a whole lot of modernity is like been sucked into everyone, I could definitely see Bible stories not presented as just Christian literature, but as in the same way that Percy Jackson is. I could definitely see that happening. Um, and the reason I believe that it's more mythology is that a UU that came here, I think he's passed away now. His name's Ted Odyson, and he believed that Jesus's stories, or that the New Testament was told like an old way of Jewish storytelling. I don't know the details on that. I never got to meet the guy. This is through my mom,
Mm.
but I can definitely see that. I can so see that. And then my final point on faith in God and all that is that it should not be a substitute for free will. Um, Not constricting yourself, I think, is a very important part of life and living it as free as you possibly can. And falling under just kind of falling into a faith 100% to the point where you're so devoted that it almost seems cult like. That's taking it too far. So don't use it as a substitute for the truth and really think about it and discover it. And that brings me into free will itself. As I stated before, free will is real. There's no real set path of life in my eyes. There's no real pattern to anything. There's just the present moment, and that's all that anyone can worry about, really. Um, and the theory I have that goes along with it, you're gonna love or hate this title. I call it the immortal terrorist theory. And that is where, so there's this theory out there called the quantum immortality theory, and that is where your conscious body, whatever universe you're conscious in, you're completely immortal. If you try to commit suicide, the attempt fails. If you get ran over by a car, you survive the crash. If you get shot, the bullet misses you. You're always immortal till the foreseeable end of time. Um, and there's some more quantum mathematical stuff into it that I don't feel like getting into because I'm not big on math. Um, but what if you could exploit that? What if you could go your whole life living this super immoral life of chaos and destruction to the point where you have infinite resources, like literal like ammunition and stuff, um, are immortal because of that whole quantum immortality thing, and have no motivation behind it. You could have absolutely no motivation behind it. Because that's what a lot of psychopaths do. They have no motivation behind it. And any normal person could have no motivation. They could be doing it for a joke for all I care, for the bit. But the dominoes can fall in such a place where that can happen. And because of its theoretical existence, free will can indicate that both that's impossible and that it's 100% possible. And that's how I see free will. The motivation, consciousness, any sort of path of life is completely unpredictable. Um, the final art related thing I want to get into is non music related, and it's an anime series. For those that don't know in the crowd, anime is a Japanese animated series. Um, that's literally what they call Japanese animated series. And I'd say that my favorite anime of all time is called Neon Genesis Evangelion. I consider it the best non music art of all time. Then again, there's a lot of literature that I haven't caught up on. But as of right now, I see it as the best non music art ever created. And it's short, it's like 25, 26 episodes long. each 20 to 30 minutes, not including the final hour long double episode movie thing. Um, and it's a series about this character called Shinji Ikari. Um, and he's experiencing Japan getting destroyed by these angel robots. And he gets thrown in because he's the chosen one somehow, and gets thrown into a robot and has to fight these evil angel robots. And it starts off as a very generic sci-fi kind of ordeal, but due to the creator's mental health, um, the budget of the show, and a couple of like other weird factors in there that I don't remember, the show ends up becoming a very existential deep dive um, into the mentalities of each of the characters, and it debatably derails, but for a really and just again a very mesmerizing sort of way that's really profound to me. Um, and not only that, I find it to be the best use of visuals in pretty much any film or TV, animated or not. Um, there are points where it seems like the budget's just kind of completely destroyed, and there's just little scrap drawings of each of the characters. It's really mesmerizing to watch. And it resonates with my own mental health struggles I've had over the years and my own thoughts on humanity as well. And finally, before I get to the conclusion, I'd like to talk about Denny's. So that's what I call my core friend group. I think they're in the audience right now. My friends Sam and Luna. They're back there. Um, and that's primarily what it consists of. Um, and what a night of Denny's consists of is us going on a Discord call. Discord is a website where you can like chat and like get on voice chat with people. Um, and we talk about our day, our lives, whatever thoughts we have about life, and just being absolute buffoons for like an hour to 4 hours. Um, and the reason why we call it Denny's is because there's this YouTube video out there of this hardcore concert at a Denny's. Um, and we found that absolutely funny, and we thought, what if we did that? That would be funny. Um, and another reason we call it is that we use various food items as like metaphors for things. I'm not gonna get into that right now. That's for Sam and Luna to know. Um, and then that draws me back to my conclusion. Um, Going away from this Odyssey and trying to, and after this point, and just where I'm going with my life is, I plan to focus on more of the creating side of art rather than just dissecting it, because that's a lot of what I've been doing. I'm probably going to end up retiring my music review account on Instagram. Um, I got another year in me though for that. But I want to focus more on creating stuff, making music, writing. Um, there was another thing I had in my head that completely decided to float away. Um, but and go to college. I'm hoping to go to college, whether that be for theater. That's pretty much the trajectory I'm headed on right now. But right now I'm in community college, trying to get my associates. Um, who knows? Maybe I might go off and start a weird avant-garde band. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows? The thing I keep in mind through all of it is that the future may be scary, may be daunting, but it doesn't exist. It's completely arbitrary. It's a concept to make you think ahead, yes, but it's arbitrary enough to where you just don't really have to worry about it too much. Of course, I'm still going to worry about it. I have existential crises on the weekends, like every weekend. But as of right now, I don't think I have to worry about it too much. And that brings me back to my final point. The whole reason I did this was to get to the point of my motivation, and that motivation was to showcase the tangible things in my life: family, art, Denny's, all of it, all tangible things in my life that have not only built me up to the person I am now, but have also been the parts of my life that have been the most profound. I'm Isaac Robinson, this is my Odyssey. Thank you so much.
Wow. Okay. We are going to take our I don't say moment, minute, 60 seconds of silence. And I have also been asked to take a offering. So thank you very much. We'll have an offering basket passed while we meditate. Well, Isaac, I really want to thank you. This has been eye opening and absolutely enthralling look at the inner life of a thinker. Yeah,
Indeed.
yeah. So, without further ado, remember that Isaac has the choice of answering or not answering something. Would you raise your hand if you have a question, and I will bring you the microphone.
Could you talk a little bit about what kind of art you create?
Oh, yeah. Um, so as I mentioned before, I have my music review account on Instagram. It's called Crystal Views. That's Crystal with a K. Um, but other than that, um, I, as I said before, I act. I'm in a show right now. I do shows. Um, I I produce music. I have a program that allows me to produce different kinds of music. Um, I'm getting into guitar. Actually starting to write my own music for that. Um, I've attempted to write scripts and books and stuff before, but that's been easier said than done, I will say. Um, and then I think that's all I can think of right now. There may be more out in the world that I can talk about afterwards, but as of right now, that's where I am with creating things.
Hi, Isaac. Thank
Hi.
you for sharing. I was very interested when you speak about the envisioning of, when you kind of segue from the beauty of art to envisioning God. When you're talking about your music and transcendental experiences, since music has frequencies, um, since music has frequencies, have you ever looked into when you're creating the music, some of which I would kind of knew about,
Mhm.
how you experience it on a neurological and limbic in your limbic system, the frequencies, some of the divine harmonies and whatnot. Yes,
Yeah,
yes, yes.
definitely.
Yeah, tell me what you know and how you feel about like divine harmonies and other things, because last year's opera is today's Norwegian heavy metal and throat singing, right? Yeah.
In a way, yeah. That is where I started with a lot of my music philosophies, actually. Um, I mean, not only do did I have sort of a knack for it with how I'm in the classical and such, but not only, yes, I do find things like divine harmonies, certain frequencies to definitely have that psychological effect. Um, but there are even some other things. For a while, you mentioned Norwegian black metal. I valued distortion a lot when it came to music, actually. Because yes, it's blaring, but it's blaring in a way that's kind of earth-shattering, I find. And my initial philosophy before I got into thinking about music as deep as I do now is how stimulating it is to me. Not just if it sounds good or not, but just how does it stimulate me? And I found that album Death Consciousness by Have a Nice Life to be that stimulating to me where I found it profound. Um so yes, that plays a very big part in my philosophies and has played it for quite a while now.
Think I'm next. Thank you, Isaac. Um, we see each other in passing almost daily, and probably this is the longest I've ever obviously been able to listen to you. And I just want you to know that the another creative possibility for your future, I truly believe, is teaching. I have learned more this morning in a half an hour than I've learned probably in the last 6 months.
Oh
So
wow.
thank you very, very much.
Thank you for that. I have thought about teaching actually. Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've seen you as a performer the at various theater productions. Is there any parts you've had that were very memorable and
Ooh,
meaningful to you?
that's a good one. Yeah, I've had some over the years. So, the main theater company that I work with is Theater for Young America, and that's where most of my roles have sort of lied. Um, I'd say probably my first real favorite role was playing Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer. Um, Not only did I get to be barefoot and have a southern accent for that one, um, that's the first time I really kind of felt free on stage because the way I was blocked. And I was just young enough to where I could be energetic enough for it, but just old enough to where I could really understand it. So it was like a perfect sweet spot. Um, uh, Role I had recently was Victor Frankenstein in Frankenstein. That role was wild to me. Um, a lot of subtextual reasoning, but the main reasoning is it's one of my biggest roles I've had. A lot of lines, just word vomit all the time. Um, but it got to a point where I started unintentionally method acting and just felt as delirious as Victor Frankenstein was. So there's that. And then I've also really been doing some Shakespeare acting as of late. And one of my fondest memories from Colorado, actually, that I look back upon positively, was my role as Pandarus in Troilus and Cressida. Um, I find not only do I just find him one of Shakespeare's most fun and funny characters, um, very similar to that Huck Finn kind of ordeal, but in a bit of an older light. And then the last one I guess I'd mention is Titus Andronicus in Titus Andronicus. Um, that one. So that plays infamously gory in Shakespeare. Infamously, probably his most gory, violent, and crude. So what did the Heart of America Shakespeare Festival's apprentice acting troupe Team Shakespeare do about it? They made it a Christmas musical. We did Titus Andronicus the Christmas musical. And um that role was so fun. Also a bit of unintentional delirious method acting there because I was under the weather during performance, so I was just like, okay, I'm gonna let all the brain juices do their thing. So those would probably be the roles I'd consider the biggest ones in my life so far.
Isaac. I think everyone at All Souls feels so blessed that you are part of our All Souls family, and it's wonderful to hear your personal story. But I am wondering right now, what could we at All Souls do to support you and our other young adults that we're not doing now? Or maybe you could tell us what we're doing that's really good. But we want to support you. We want to support Sam, and Luna, and others. What observations can you share?
You know, I've talked about that with people a lot. I've especially talked about that with my dad, and he's on the board here. And it's more ambiguous than I think it lends itself out to be. Um, a lot of the people that are here are just not even to say anything about anyone. They're simply older, and that's good. That's good that you all have an outlet, and I'm glad to be a part of that. Um, and that is a real struggle to really get younger people invested in this kind of stuff. Um, I've had so many different ideas over the years. I'm trying to pick out the different ones. One thought I had was really being able to stress the social justice aspect. I think maybe having the Pride Fest. I think that drag night we had was really, really good, and I think doing some more things like that would be a really good thing. Um, more things in that regard. I think also stressing that we are not necessarily a theistic church, but we allow anyone of any beliefs, which sounds confusing, but I think putting it in a way that is opening and welcoming to people in a genuine and sincere way, that can definitely work. Um, and just having things for those young people to do. Um, and I think we're definitely getting closer and closer to that, but um, I think some more common events in that regard and really being able to connect with them like this. That's sort of the final thing I'd say is to really be able to talk, connect to them, welcome them, and taking this step, I even think having me on here really makes me feel appreciated in that regard. I thank you guys for that so much.
I have a question. Do you think acting and taking on the roles of other people and getting into the idea of the character that had the emotions, not just the character but the creator of the plays, do you think that like expands your views spiritually? Do you feel like all those different perspectives give you insight into enough different ways of thinking that it expands your horizons in the way that you view the universe and your life and the possibilities, your spiritual life?
Yes, and I didn't realize that till recently. Um, I've done most of my shows with Theater for Young America. And yes, I've had Shakespeare all my life, but I never really got to thinking about the characters and the plots and such in that deep of a way. Um, but yes, that is an entire thing there. Theater is pretty much equal to music in that regard. Theater and literature in general. Um, you have that stage there, and every person on that stage, every whether it be backstage, acting, they're all working as an instrument to the whole picture. And yes, being able to play a role not only gives a big insight into the mentality of the character, but really good playwrights. I'd credit Shakespeare, Samuel Beckett. Um, there's another guy there. I think is the guy. It's called Strange Encounters or Strange Interludes. It's one of the two. The guy who wrote that, um, they do a really good job of having that insight. Um, the guy who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, Glass Menagerie, especially. Um, those have really good characters that give insight into that general artistic consciousness there. Yeah, it's completely been a thing that's developed for me over the years.
Isaac, being a student and a teacher most of your life, do you have an interest in um, going the collegiate route and getting a degree? And
Yeah,
oh,
yes. So I'm getting my associate's degree right now over at Metropolitan Community College, MCC. I'm going to Maple Woods. Um, and after that, so far the trajectory is a theater acting degree. Um, and so far the main college I'm thinking for that is Webster University at St. Louis. And they have a conservatory program that it's very intense. It's a very intense conservatory program, but you work on various different aspects like auditioning, both for film and theater, um, character work, voice work, clown work they just added. Um, and it's 4 years and you don't have to go to graduate school for it. Um, so that's sort of where I'm headed in terms of the collegiate road. Yeah.
So, I really haven't
There you go.
gotten to much of what you've done. I can't believe that, but I haven't because I've always enjoyed the things you do here. But so I'm wondering what you're doing right now and how you're thinking that may fit into all your thoughts about uh, spirituality and
Yeah.
purpose in life and all, and your energy and all.
Yeah. So, currently what I'm doing right now is I'm in a show right now. I'm in Princess and the Pea. You can come see me barefoot again. And run around as like a evil troll dude on stage. Um, so I'm doing that right now. Um, after this, I get to run the PowerPoint and the sound for today's service. Um, I am working on some choreography with a couple friends of mine, Luna included, um, on a dance that we're going to be presenting to um, our former dance tutor. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else there. I'm working. Yes, yes, that exists. I am, yeah, I am doing the parody for the Heart of America Shakespeare Festival show of The Tempest. And let's just say I may or may not have a friend who's Goodwill, the guy in the big Shakespeare mascot suit. I may or may not know who that is. Um, and then in my personal life, trying to write a couple different scripts. I'm working on a collaborative mixtape with an internet friend of mine. We both rap, and that's where I didn't get to stress out much here. Darn. Um, but as of how that's affecting me currently in my life, I think I'm at a weird point right now where I feel like the stresses are going to die down by this week, crawl back up again as soon as the next month starts. Um, but as of right now, I'm in the in between of contentness and holy bazinga, I'm freaking out about life right now. That's where my state's at right now. Bit of a purgatory, if you will. It's a nice little purgatory.
Hi, Isaac. I feel like I've been a groupie of yours for since you were much younger. That's how I got to know your mom. I went up to her one time and said, "Oh my God, your son is so talented. He makes me laugh to the point where I could pee my pants. It's just crazy."
Easy thing.
And it's been wonderful. You have given joy to so many people over the years. You're such a physical actor for somebody who's so cerebral. So it's like, who are you? But I have to ask, since you've given so many people joy, if you had to name three things, just three, that give you joy personally, what would they be?
Just three things. Wow, that's tiny. Um, Listening to music, quite obviously, very big part. Um, Ambiverted activities, so both socializing and having my alone time. And having a good creative or workflow is really when I come out with some of my strongest stuff. Those are the three sort of key things I can think of off the top of my head that bring me joy, but there's probably a million other stuff.
Hi.
Hi, Sam.
Speaking of things that make you happy, out of all the art you've made, rapping, music review, playwriting, what do you think
Yeah.
gives you has given you the most fulfillment out of all of them?
Oh, when he mentions playwriting, I get shivers down my spine. Um, my favorite of the bunches of stuff that I've worked on. Here's a Denny's thing I can mention. So my friend Luna started this over there. And one random night during Denny's, you can do this thing on Discord where you can share your computer screen. And she shared this um these PowerPoint slides that she made. I think she uses Canva for that. Um and yeah, she made straight up like slides relating to Denny's stuff. I won't say the name because it's a tad too vulgar for this audience, but we laughed our booty cheeks off and had so much fun with it. And it ended up becoming this recurring thing. And now every Monday night, me, Sam, and Luna show off our own slides. My slides, I do them through Google Slides. My slides are called, I made this series called Blue Surfer, which is where I took this literal stock image of a blue surfer silhouette and decided to make him this cosmic eldritch horror of an entity that terrorizes the world and so on and so forth. I have other characters in there. I have Sigmund Freud and Elvis Presley. They get into an awesome gay relationship. Um there are other random plot points in there too. I think a character from Courage the Cowardly Dog's in there as well. I love doing that. That's actually come out with some of my best stuff. Um and do I mention do I mention the rap or do I keep the rap career subtle for now? Talk to me afterwards if you want to learn more about the rap career. But that brings me that's that's one of my favorite creative things I do. I hope that answers your question. Yay.
And I love the nerdiness of it. That certainly appeals to me. Um, I'm going to take moderator privilege and ask, I think, and there's several forum committee members in this room, I think a great forum would be you and Alex Westerfeld doing Does Free Will Exist back and forth. Oh my gosh. I mean, you don't have to say yes, just put it in the back. Just let it
Oh, happily.
let it
Happily.
ferment and we'll see what comes out of the mix. But oh, I would love to do that. I would love to attend that and just sort of watch what happens. So, okay, we are out of time, I'm afraid, and I'm really sorry because I think I have hundreds of questions, and your parents could ask you questions that they've always wanted to know, but
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
not dare ask. But
Probably. Yeah.
unfortunately, the time has passed. Sorry, guys. But thank you again. This was absolutely marvelous. I really enjoyed it. There is a link to this on YouTube. No, there's not. Okay, never mind. I have no idea. This has gone into the ether. I don't know where it is. So it's with all those lost faxes that used to happen in my office back in the day. Circling the earth with the missing socks. Anyway, thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next week at 9:30.
Thank you for having